today's business landscape, companies have transcended geographical boundaries and their offerings have largely transitioned into the digital realm. From cloud infrastructure to mobile applications, big data pipelines, and even social media platforms, the digital revolution has become a driving force behind the rapid evolution of application development. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Analytics Insight podcast, where we talk about the ever evolving tech space. And I'm your host, Priya Dayalani. Now, when a deadly pandemic hit the world in 2020, what every company wished at that time was to be hacked up by modern applications. Every business wanted to be accessible and available with better user experience and performance. Now, many companies achieved that too, but at the cost of stress and frustrations which are faced by the DevOps teams, architects, developers, and even the application developers who were working hard and making it available 24/7 to respond to customers' changing requirements. So today, let's welcome Bhanu Jamwal, the head of pre-sales and solution engineering Asia Pacific at PingCAP, who will throw light on business benefits of modern applications and what are some of the best practices for developing these applications. Hi, Bhanu, how are you doing?
Hi, Priya. Doing fantastic and pleasure to be here.
Great. It's a pleasure to have you with us too on a podcast. And I think we are going to talk more around the modern applications and a lot of things into detail, of course. So before that, let's start by letting us know more about what exactly is PingCAP. If you can brief us about it, if there are any specific solutions that you work on, or a specialization that the company deals into.
Yeah, sure, Priya. So PingCAP is a database company. We started back in 2015, and it has a very interesting backdrop to it. We have these three seasoned infrastructure engineers who were, sick and tired of the way traditional databases manage data at scale. And in most cases, the moment there is a need for expanding your data rapidly, both from the incoming traffic to the underlying data volume, it's a very complex way to do it. And I think every developer who, as of today, is managing such rapidly increasing workloads on traditional databases generally tends to, or probably would agree to this with me here. So I think when these three infrastructure engineers saw no good solution in the market, they themselves decided that they'll go ahead and build one, and more importantly, in an open source way, right? So that's how PingCAP was formed. That's how this modern distributed database was developed from ground up. And this database is actually called as TiDB, and the Ti basically means titanium. With the massive adoption from open source community, PingCAP has been busy building this database and fine tuning it on a day-to-day basis. We are an advanced open source distributed SQL database, and we have the MySQL compatibility. I think the reason we went into this space was because we realized there's a huge usage of MySQL databases across, specifically in the transactional workloads. And we also saw the challenges, as I just mentioned. So TiDB now has become one of the most popular open source database projects in the world. And this can easily be measured if you can go, you go online and see how we get, recognition from our open source community on GitHub. So I think to how TiDB kind of is slightly different in terms of architecture. It's an open source distributed database. It was actually termed as NewSQL in early days because we've all seen SQL databases. We've all also seen NoSQL databases, but there was this emergence of these new type of databases, which was combining the best features of traditional relational databases with the scalability of NoSQL systems, right? So TiDB offers horizontal scalability, high availability, strong consistency, and it maintains fully MySQL compatibility. This database is it kind of combines both your transactional workloads as well as it adds a flavor of providing that additional flexibility of running real-time analytics on the same platform. So far, I think TidyB has witnessed about 10,000 plus downloads, with 3,000 plus enterprise customers in 50 over countries. We are processing billions of transactions on a daily basis, and I think we are growing as the new industries, the new businesses are experiencing challenges. We're trying to solve those challenges. So, to summarize, basically, we are a one-stop database solution where we're trying to solve these rapid growing scalability challenges for modern applications. Priya.
Great. Thank you for sharing that, Bhanu. And I think we would also like to know more about the TidyB application of yours. And probably we'll discuss about some use cases and success metrics of it later in our discussion. Since you've mentioned and discussed about what the company is into, we would also like to know more about you, Bhanu. I think you have years of experience in a technical capacity in infrastructure development or systems management. So if you can tell us more about yourself, your journey till date, and what led you to focus on modern application development.
Yes, sure. So I come with close to about 22 years of total experience, and most of my time has been spent in the field of databases. The databases have definitely evolved. If you kind of look back, and do a flashback of 15 to 20 years down the line, the entire database stack was completely different compared to what it is today. We are coming from a very traditional, very limited set of databases to today, where we are talking about 50 to 60 over database solutions out there in the market, right? So there has been this amazing evolvement. So I basically have been into the space of databases. I have my first half of my career was more focused towards banking, where I joined Development Bank of Singapore. Was there in this bank for over 10 years, and then moved to banks like Barclays and OCBC Bank, which is based out in Singapore. And then my second half of my career was more focused then into consulting, where I started consulting about database solutions, about the entire database pipelines, how did basically every part of your data journey, when it moves from front end all the way till back end, which includes your transactions, which includes your analytics, which includes AI, and so on and so forth. I think now my complete focus is into driving innovation and excellence in the region's data solutions, and that's where I am now leading the solution engineering business for Asia Pacific for PingCAP. We are going out and talking to customers and trying to understand their existing pain points. We've seen how rapidly this entire digital native businesses have been growing. If there is a business which has just recently started last year, I'll not be surprised if today they have probably become a unicorn, and that rapid evolvement of their business, of course, also demands equal innovation to their underlying infrastructure, and that also has to grow at the same pace as the business is growing, right? And this is where probably we've seen challenges. This is where if an organization started with traditional infrastructure and traditional data platforms and even traditional way of building their applications, generally tend to struggle, and hence they have to look at this modernization of their applications to databases, and how they grow and how they transform that in as shorter time as possible. So with PingCAP specifically, I think, and especially the founders of PingCAP, have realized this pain point out there in the market, and that's where I, along with my team, have been trying and doing an enablement to the community, and specifically the focus has been there in India, because we've seen that there is a huge rapid growth of these organizations, and at the same time, when there is growth, there's the challenges which are increasing on a day-to-day basis. So that's where we are coming in. We are coming in and trying to enable our open source community out there, our developer community out there, in specifically in India. We're doing these enablement sessions with them. We are running multiple workshops to bring them to speed, not specifically for TidyB, but as a whole of how these challenges can be met today with such modern database platforms, which are there to offer.
Very well said. I think you also mentioned about, databases have evolved, and that's very true. So as a part of the evolution, I think artificial intelligence has definitely played a very important role, and AI as a whole, the technology has been making, significant strides in various industries, and I think software development domain is no exception. It earlier started as a very humble beginning in the 90s, just as a theoretical concept, but now the current state of AI is more of a transformative force, and it is also definitely playing a very important role in shaping the future of software development and application development that way. So I want to understand from you, what do you think is the role of AI in modern application development, as per your views and opinions?
Yes, so I think anywhere you go today, you of course hear about AI, and you hear about the transformation and the excellence and the innovation we hear everywhere, right? Of course, ChatGPT is something which is known to everyone, right? And who would have known that ChatGPT at some point would probably replace a search on a Google. I've seen so many whom I talk to, sometimes completely rely on ChatGPT these days, right? And it's the effectiveness and the creativity of how a response is given to you, in a very easy to understand language, and it becomes a lot more easier, for anyone who's doing a search, for example. So definitely, yes, AI has a bigger role to play, and I think if you see any AI businesses which have been growing today, I think the first thing which I would point out is the first common aspect between all these AI businesses is their underlying use of this data storage called vector. Vector databases, in fact, have been there into this industry for a while, but they never got that much attention which they are getting now. And simple reason being that there have been new innovations in form of models. One common term in AI is LLM, which is the large language models, and how they can actually store their data on these vectors, which we call it as, which helps these AI models to be to fetch information in the most efficient manner from these vectorized storage engines. So that is number one. So that is more at the data storage standpoint, I think. And then when we talk about applications, of course, the modernization of such applications using AI can come in different forms. Some examples could be how do you enhance developer productivity with these with the help of AI. When it comes to applications, how can you increase or improve user experience personalizations? For example, if a user is there on your platform, how can you tailor the right content, or you provide a recommendation to someone based on their behavior when they're browsing their content online, or for that matter, for example, in e-commerce, if you today go and try to shop something on Flipkart or Amazon, does the platform gives you product recommendations which you are trying to look at, right? And this is all possible if you have the right AI practices in place. Another very common thing which we hear about AI is the chatbots. These chatbots are no longer those traditional chatbots where you had to actually key in the responses in advance and you anticipate your users asking you a question. It's now more like if a user asks you a question, your AI will scan through your entire underlying data, which could be vectors, and it can fetch you the information precisely what you're looking for. And these could not be pre-saved questions, but these could be dynamic questions asked by the user. There's a lot of possibilities which we see. There's a lot of innovation which we would see in future. But I also, other than the applications, I also wanted to touch base on databases. While the innovation of AI would definitely happen in the application world, we would also continue to see new innovation happening at the database level, which is leveraging more and more AI. An example could be that, let's say you have a database and you're using it for, let's say, some very mission critical transactional workload, right? Now the challenge is, let's say tomorrow when your workload increases, for example, if it's a festive period and you expect more and more users coming on your platform, and citing an example of e-commerce, let's say they're making some online purchases, especially during the festive period, or especially during some discount periods where these platforms are offering, you may expect more traffic coming in. So going forward, using the AI, these databases may just be scaling out your databases by predicting these user behavior and these user scenarios who are coming and doing an online purchase. Right? That could be one example. Other example could be more into the database terms. If a developer is going and creating, let's say, indexes on their data, can the AI give you a list of indexes already, or list of columns where the indexes should be created, right? Or if it could be an anomaly detection, where if there is an unauthorized access which has happened to your DB, can there be sufficient measures in place and where you can leverage AI into it? Or another scenario could be, where there has been some issue which has come at your database level. Can there be an AI which can auto tune and at least find you the first level answers of what really happened? Can it tell you that root cause analysis of the issue which has happened in the database? So the point I'm trying to make is, while there is modernization happening at the application level, there would be a lot of modernization which would happen at the database level. And I think that is something which would be very, very exciting, which I see from here. Priya.
Well, yes, true. I completely agree with that. And I think it's so important to have an eye for some of the innovative use cases of AI in databases, like you mentioned, and you also gave some interesting examples about it. And I think modernization, application development, along with adding some innovative features or adding some innovations in the databases solutions is also very important. And I think when we're talking about a sharing of resources, like hardware, software, data is one of the principles, like one of the core principles of a cloud computing. So with different levels of openness to the software and concurrency, it's easier to process data simultaneously through multiple processors. The more fault tolerant an application is, the more quickly it can recover from a system failure. And in today's digital landscape, distributed systems have become the backbone of modern computing, and it powers everything from your web applications to cloud platforms. So that way, distributed system is growing in a lot of significance. So I want to understand from you, how do you think that these distributed systems addresses scalability and reliability challenges of a modern application? And if that includes, talking about use cases of TiDB, we would be happy to know more about it.
Yeah, sure, Priya. So yes, definitely, I think distributed databases probably is need of the hour now, especially looking at the increasing workloads, increasing data volumes, and the growing demands of these modern applications. So I think the distributed databases are flexible enough the way they have been architected, and they generally they have the ability to adapt and evolve in tandem with the changing demands of data management and processing. These databases help you to provide seamless horizontal scalability, and they ensure efficient handling of unpredictable data growth. Now, that is one of the challenges which, of course, we see in the market. That is a limitation of these traditional databases, which cannot scale, and a simple reason being that these databases back then were not designed to scale. Because again, if you kind of do a flashback 15 years ago, there was no hard need or requirements for such a growth. The growth was very predictable in those days. But nowadays we see, businesses like Flipkart, businesses like, Myntra, Meesho, we've seen all these have grown so huge in such a short span of time. And hence, it's very hard to predict how much a business would grow. And hence, that is where a data platform which supports horizontal scalability becomes very, very important and key to you, to your business. And hence, you also ensure that your database continues to grow along with your business, right? And your databases or your underlying infrastructure does not limit you to grow, because that's the last thing any organization wants. Another thing which we see is that these distributed databases ensure high availability and fault tolerance, which is very, very crucial for uninterrupted operations, right? I mean, if today we go online to, let's say, Meesho, and you were doing some shopping, right? Meesho cannot just give users or shoppers a message that, sorry, we are down for an hour, or forget about an hour, we are down for 5 minutes, we'll be back very soon. If that really happens, then most of the users, of course, would move out of Meesho and probably go to some other platform and start shopping, right? Because that is one thing where we have so many options as shoppers out there that, I mean, we can make a move to, let's say, Flipkart or to someone else easily, and this 5 minutes of downtime may just lead to huge amount of losses for any business, right? And hence, high availability becomes the very, very essential element in a database platform. And finally, consistency in your data also becomes very, very important at the same time. Hence, it delivers reliability to data platforms, reliability to your business, right? And this consistency, again, especially for use cases which are fintechs. For example, PhonePe today. If, let's say, I make a transaction using PhonePe from my UPI ID to someone else, right? If the data is not consistent, there may be a state where I have made a transfer, my account is updated, but the one who has not, who's on the receiving end, their data did not get updated on their underlying account, is a typical example of inconsistency, right? And of course, businesses cannot afford that because if they do, then they completely lose the trust from their end users. So I think these are the key essential elements which distributed databases try to solve, and that is where TidyB's distributed architecture allows businesses to scale horizontally. And they can completely overcome the single machine limitations on day one of operations when they actually move to TidyB, because TidyB is architected in such a way that you can start small. You can probably start with, let's say, a 1 terabyte of data storage today, and you can just continue to grow to 1 petabyte, with no impact to your ongoing business, right? So you continue to grow along, and at the same time, you continue to cater to that ever-growing, unpredicted traffic which you expect, right? Some days your amount of users on your platform may be lower, but tomorrow maybe it's higher, right? So TidyB as a distributed architecture can manage that traffic, manage that unpredictability, and at the same time, help you to grow your business. And then, in addition, what we also have brought in is a support for edge type workloads. This edge type is actually a term which was identified by Gartner. It's actually called hybrid transactional analytical processing architectures, which means that a platform which can actually process both your transactional workloads and at the same time can also run your real-time analytics on the same workloads. Now, this becomes very, very useful in especially the modern applications which we have experienced, right? One example could be, or maybe a very simplified example could be, what if I'm playing an online game, right? Nowadays, when we play an online game on our mobile phones, we don't play with a robot. And in most cases, we will play with someone like us sitting somewhere across the globe, right? And which then means that the moment I'm playing a game and let's say my game ends, I can actually see my name in the leaderboard of that game, right? Certain games gives you that leaderboard. And how did that happen? Of course, at the underlying application, there was some analytical query which would have run, which would have compared my points against all other points of the players who are playing at the same time, and hence then produce that result, right? So for such workloads, for such kind of a use case, if you cannot run your real-time analytics in real time, then you will not be able to run such scenarios. And traditionally, how this happens is you have a transactional database, for example, a MySQL database, right? And then you have an analytical database, which is a separate database where you're running these analytical queries. And how you move data between these transactional database and analytical database is using something called an ETL layer, where you're moving the data from one database to other in order for you to run analytical queries there, right? So you basically lose time when you're moving data from one DB to another, right? And hence you lose the ability to run real-time analytics, right? So real HTAP or real-time analytical use cases could be one which I've talked about. It could be, let's say, if I make an online credit card transaction, can it be flagged as fraudulent or not? Or if I make an online remittance from, let's say, Singapore to India, can I find out if this remittance had anything to do with money laundering, right? So there are multiple use cases out there for such real-time analytics, and that is something which we support in TidyB, along with ability to run and process heavy transactions on the system. TidyB is comes with a cloud native architecture, which facilitates easiness of starting with your journey of your database journey with TidyB, and hence enjoying the flexibility and resiliency of the database. Yeah.
Great. I think you pretty well highlighted the importance of horizontal scaling and why do you need such a platform that supports horizontal scaling, and that's so important in today's modern business landscape. And TidyB being a cloud native architecture definitely adds more edge towards the solution, I believe. So moving ahead, I think when we're talking about reliability, it's like you mentioned in earlier responses that it's difficult for businesses to predict their growth. So I think it's also very hard to lead an unstable product. We can't reliably plan things because we often need to roll back changes and put out fires. We must ensure that our product is reliable so that it improves our SLAs and velocity as well. So, reliability is not something we can just build in one place. We need to make sure all parts of the ecosystem work together. That guarantees reliability everywhere. So, similarly, an unreliable database can affect your organization in many ways. So, I want to understand from you what are certain things or some aspects probably that organizations or developers should look into in terms of deploying a reliable database solution.
Yeah, sure. And very rightly said, I think reliability is, I mean, you can't get away with that. I think it's one of the most essential parts of it, to make sure that your underlying, data platform and also, the way your application runs, both are reliable, right? So now the challenge which I've highlighted earlier is that these very rapidly growing enterprises are struggling with handling these massive data volumes, right? And if there is still a use of traditional databases, which we have seen they are struggling to meet these demands due to scalability issues in single machine environments. MySQL database is one example which runs on a single machine or a single node, we call it as, right? And then at the same time, of course, there are limitations in performing real-time processing, vulnerabilities, and single point of failures, which are experienced. And finally, the complexity of data integration, which leads to fragmented data silos and inconsistencies. Right. Now, SQL databases, which are right now being used, they are capable of supporting diverse workloads simultaneously. Yeah, these solutions offer scalability, real-time capabilities, making sure your data is highly available, there is no single point of failure, and they provide this more flexible approach to manage large-scale data effectively in today's dynamic business landscape. So I think, again, connecting the dots with TidyB distinguishes itself from other databases through such excellent capabilities, which I've highlighted. One is horizontal scalability. The second one is automatic sharding. And just to give you a little bit more context on automatic sharding, for any current, DBA or developers who are actually running application, a high demanding application on databases which are running on single machines like MySQL and others, when they start growing, the current workaround for such scenarios is that you start building and start creating multiple databases which can still host one single application. What this means is that if your data, let's say, starts growing and you start managing multiple databases for one single application, you now also have to decide which data should go to what underlying DB instance. Well, for example, let's talk an example of e-commerce. If you have a user data, which is our data when we register into a system, our data, let's say, is decided to go into one database. The data about the online items which are shown on e-commerce probably goes to another one database. The data on how this is going to ship, so all the data related to shipping and logistics goes to one database, and so on and so forth. This manual decision of how the data will get distributed, we call it as sharding of data in database terms, right? And when you do this, when you go with this approach of manually deciding what information should go to what instance, this then introduces a huge amount of complexity into your business, because later, if you want to, let's say, you want to scale more on your UX, you kind of start witnessing more and more data coming in for your shipping, right? You have to scale your system accordingly to manage that data, right? Or if a certain data for a certain module shrinks, then you also have to make sure how do you then reshard your data, or how do you create a new policy of distribution of this data. So this data distribution with the manual data sharding route is one of the most complex things we have come across, and every DBA team generally can relate to this. And that is the primary reason why our owners, our co-founders, had the same challenge and had to come out of this. And that's where they built TidyB, which can help you to automatically distribute or shard your data, regardless of how your data is growing. TidyB has a separation of compute and storage. So if you want more compute, you can continue to scale your compute. While if you need more storage, you can continue to scale your storage both independently without any correlation. You can run your real-time queries. You can have a more of a cloud native design. You obviously have the MySQL compatibility. So any MySQL applications can move to TidyB as is. And finally, making sure that you have the high availability, which is built in. So to summarize, having a reliable database, is made possible with TidyB with this distributed architecture, and making sure that at any given time, your data is consistent. And at the same time, your data is always available, regardless of underlying infrastructure failures, regardless of underlying, let's say, availability zone failures, if you're talking about cloud providers like AWS, GCP, and so on. And hence making sure that your business never gets impacted, from the underlying DB.
Well, yes, I think I agree with you. And it's so important to have when we have access to data, but distribution of data also is one of the critical factors in terms of how you're managing your data. And with IDB as one of its solution, simplifies all of the issues or challenges related with the distribution of data. And like you mentioned, consistency of data is also really, really important when it comes to scaling your business and how you're managing the growth of data as well. One last question for you. What are some of the trends that you think would take place in the coming years in application development or in distributed systems for that matter?
Yeah, so I think the first trend, I think we've talked about it, is definitely AI. I think AI has a very big play in development of both development and modernization of both the applications as well as databases. AI would be the leading force for such development. And I think it is set to play an even bigger role this year in 2024. We have already seen so many, new AI applications which are already, in available in the market, and I think this will continue to elevate, right? One another example is let's say low code, no code platforms who are leveraging AI to an extent, that the developer productivity is increased, and it's a lot more efficient for the underlying developers now to focus on business solutions rather than struggling with writing a particular code. So AI is definitely one. Secondly, I would see in future we see everything as a service. Would see a lot of adoption for serverless offerings. And when we talk about serverless from a database standpoint, we're generally talking about providing you a service and not worrying about the underlying infrastructure on, let's say, a distributed database, right? So you just put an application on a serverless database. You continue to decrease your traffic. The database would take care of your scaling, whether the database has to auto scale out or auto scale back in. Whether it has to add more resources or it has to remove the resources. I think everything would be taken care by the serverless. As of today, while I speak, relating it back to TidyB, we already have a serverless layer, and we continue to foresee more and more usage of serverless, going forward. So I think serverless is definitely the second one. And I think the third one I would talk about is distributed adoption of distributed SQL databases. We still haven't seen, a lot of adoption, in some regions. And I think we do foresee adoption of distributed SQL databases definitely going up, moving up and up, specifically for digital native businesses and SaaS platforms. SaaS platforms get some added advantage from such kind of an architecture because they themselves host their own tenants on this database, and for them also, the growth is unpredictable, especially the incoming traffic and the data volume. And also at the same time, SaaS customers provide dashboards to their end users, so they also need analytics. So basically, SaaS and digital native businesses like e-commerce and logistics and fintechs, I think they would see this adoption of distributed SQL databases very, very soon, where they have to reach. And I think finally, I would probably say about more adoption on open source. We have already witnessed adoption to open source. We've seen many organizations who prefer open source over closed source. And that is primarily because, one, they do not really want to get locked in with a particular vendor, because that then limits them to do further innovation and modernizing their own applications. Because then, if you're using a closed source, then you have a direct dependency on the vendor. Rather, if you use an open source, then you have more flexibility to make changes on the underlying platform. We have also recently seen that there have been organizations who are making a move from an open source to a closed source, which kind of is it kind of it disappoints and upsets the users because they have always the leaders who have adopted technologies always wants their underlying platforms to be open source. So to summarize, I think PingCAP, I think we are a very strong advocates of open source projects. We have a very strong commitment to being fully open source with the Apache 2 license. And I think we have a strong belief that open source is not just a mean to get exposure and participation of developers in a project, but it's a core value in the developer world, which drives trust, builds community, and a community TidyB is proud to be part of. So yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say for this.
Yeah, great. I think it definitely makes sense, and I'm glad that you highlighted the significance in terms of the adoption of distributed SQL databases. I think that trend we might definitely see in the coming years. So I think the overall modern application development fulfills the need for scalability, portability, resiliency, and even agility through microservices and distributed systems and other principles and best practices as well. But I think not every company begins with the same principles. There are many ways to evaluate your current modern application development state, and in terms of how you can adopt distributed systems and ensure that a reliable database solution is in place in order to ensure that organizations become more agile and responsive in terms of the growing needs of modern application development. Well, thank you so much, Bhanu. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I think we covered some interesting insights as well as some technical details in terms of how distributed systems are important and distributed architecture and some reliable database solutions that and factors that people should consider in terms of adopting these solutions. So, thank you so much. It was pleasure having you with us on a podcast.
Likewise, Priya, thank you so much for having me here, and it was a great conversation. Thanks.
Yes, definitely. So this is for our listeners. Stay tuned for our upcoming podcast, and you can view and listen all our previous podcasts on Spotify and other leading platforms. Thank you so much.